Hello, heroes of Aeternum. Today we are going to discuss on Aeternum Awaits the facts about factions. Factions are powerful group organizations locked into the struggle to control Aeternum. After reaching a particular milestone during the early parts of your adventure, you must eventually choose a side in this conflict. As you adventure, you will be introduced to the three factions: the Marauders, the Syndicate, and the Covenant. Each faction has a set of principles and a unique motivation for wanting to control Aeternum. The three factions form the spine of PvP gameplay in Aeternum. They create clear sides and motivations for conflict. Even if you were a lone explorer braving the wilds of Aeternum on your own, being part of a faction means you always have someone on your side and you always have a clear view of the opposition. Now, after selecting a faction, you can accept missions from your faction representatives in any settlement and complete them in exchange for rewards. Factions can be PvE based or PvP based, and they offer specialized equipment and missions that will serve the goals of your faction. Once you choose a faction, you are free to create or join a company of your chosen faction. This can hold up to 100 players. Now, while a company is responsible for the day-to-day goings-on in a territory, that company's faction is ultimately the one in control. If your company wants to conquer a territory occupied by an opposing faction, it must declare war on that territory. In order to declare war, the territory your company seeks to conquer must be vulnerable. A territory is not vulnerable to a declaration of war unless it has been sufficiently undermined by an opposing faction. In order for a faction to retain control of a territory, its members must actively reinforce that faction's influence within that territory. Factions can gain influence by completing faction quests within that territory. Thus, you gain influence and you undermine the territory of the faction that's in control. Some of these quests, like PvP missions, ask you to do things like recover tactical information, deliver critical messages or items to another territory, or to patrol a territory for opposing factions. Accepting a PvP faction mission will auto-flag you for PvP. Unflagging yourself will automatically abandon the mission. Dying during your PvP mission will cause you to fail it, and you will have to go back and accept another. In addition to the rewarding faction currency, completing a PvP mission also generates influence for your faction within that territory. As mentioned before, generating influence for the controlling faction of a territory just reinforces its control, while generating influence for a faction that is not in control undermines the controlling faction and brings the territory closer to being vulnerable to a war declaration. Once a territory becomes vulnerable by being undermined by an opposing faction, all companies in the undermining faction will be able to declare war on the territory. After a short time, which allows for multiple companies in the same faction to make a war declaration, one of the companies is selected as the vanguard of the attacking forces. As the vanguard, it is up to the leaders of the selected company to build out their forces with players who volunteer to help join in on the fight and attempt to take the new territory over. So a little information about the factions. The first that I'll discuss is the Covenant. The Covenant is a fanatical order that has charged itself with cleansing the land of heretics and defilers so that its true holy nature can flourish and justice can be restored. They hope to end the corruption on Aeternum and make it a place more to their liking. The Syndicate is a secretive organization of boundless guile and intellect in search of forbidden knowledge to usher in a new age of enlightenment. The Syndicate are very much like the Illuminati, and their goal is to manipulate and take control and hold control. The Marauders are a ruthless military force bent on establishing a free nation where anyone with the strength to do so can prosper and profit. They believe in life, liberty, and property as core foundations for who they are. As far as the player base goes, it's true that each of the factions has all types of players in it. There are crafters in every faction, there are PvPers in every faction, and there are PvEers in every faction, just as there are players that mix all of them and enjoy all of them in every faction. But I will say that in my experience with the game, I've got about 130 to 150 hours in game, I have noticed some things about the factions that I'll share with you that may help you select your faction. I'll start with the Covenant. The Covenant, as we know, are religious fanatics, and this order typically, from what I have seen, has players that prefer PvE and crafting. Now they will have PvPers in the group, but I've just noticed that they tend to be the smallest group and they favor PvE. As far as the Syndicate goes, this is usually the largest group on every server that I've played on by about 10 or 15%, and they love the Zerg approach. They love to PvP, they love to PvE, but when they PvP, they typically have greater numbers, and they enjoy those greater numbers, and their strategies are based on having bigger numbers. As far as the Marauders go, this is usually the second largest group of the factions, and they are PvP based more so than any of the other factions. They enjoy fighting against larger groups, so they are the exact opposite of the Syndicate. They want to take smaller groups in and conquer larger groups, and they use strategy and tenaciousness and skill to accomplish their goals. No matter what your game style is, you will definitely find a faction for you. And remember, if you don't join that faction and participate actively in it, it hurts your faction in terms of territories. The reason why you want to help your faction with territories is because you can get better tax rates, you can determine the tax rate, and there's other advantages too to having the prestige of controlling a territory. So good luck choosing your faction. We only have a few more days wait before we get to actually jump in game. I hope that you have as much fun as I know I will, and I look forward to seeing all of you in Aeternum.